I'm going to just take you through an example answer that I wrote for a poem in time conditions with a student today. So yeah, his exam is really soon, and so we were just doing serious timed essay type stuff with no help and no kind of extra notes or anything. Like, it was very, very intense, and I think this essay actually came out pretty well, so I thought I'd share it with you guys. The question is just based on my own reinterpretation of Cambridge-style questions, so they're always strikingly or vividly, portray something or depict something, and they're always connected to a theme or a central idea in the poem. So in this case, I've made this question myself, but it's very much based on the wording of the official exams. And he really wasn't confident with this poem when we started studying it, and then he ended up feeling like it was one of his favourite ones, so that's really good. And so we did an essay on finding a small fly crushed in a book by Charles Tennyson Turner. So I'm going to just take you through my plan first. I only planned the points and I planned the thesis. In this case, my thesis was so detailed, it was here, and I ended up basically just adding it straight to the essay because I was running out of time. Normally I would write point 1, point 2, point 3 and my thesis and then start writing my essay. But it took me a little while to kind of get my points to connect nicely and to flow properly. So in this case I just kind of skipped forward and moved to the moved to the intro straight away. So the question is about how is the death of the fly portrayed. So obviously the theme is maybe death. The theme might be life. It might be the transition between life and death, that kind of thing. But that is mainly what we're going to be talking about in the essay. So I was trying to think of 3 separate points on that, but also trying to make those points link. It's very important that they connect together properly. So I have the fly's death is sudden and unexpected, which is shocking. I also think that maybe normally we wouldn't mourn a fly, but the speaker actually does mourn the fly and expresses grief. I noticed here actually I have shock twice, so ideally, I think by the time I actually write the essay I've fixed that, but don't have the same sort of idea in 2 paragraphs. It's good to mix it up. But this, like I say, is a realistic thing I did in time conditions, so there will be slight errors in it as well, which makes it more authentic. So yeah, by the time I actually write point 2, I get rid of that word. But point 1 is it's shocking and unexpected. Point 2, we're grieving it, we're sad about the death of the fly. And then we have, I always like to do a bit of a twist in the third one because it gives you a different perspective, it makes it more critical, helps you to achieve those top bands. So here, Tennyson Turner uses the fly's death as a way for the speaker to reflect on his own future and legacy and himself and, people in general and what we do with our lives and how we're remembered after death. So it's nice to do a bit of a twist there. Good, so I'm not going to read the essay aloud, it'll take me ages, but I'm going to just sort of go through. Feel free to just pause and read in detail if you think it's going to be useful. I'm going to just go through the sort of highlights of the essay, things I think worked quite well. And maybe if I notice anything that's like not great, I'll pick that up as well. This is the first time I've read back over this since writing it about an hour ago, so bear with me. Yeah, so the first thing that's good is I have this idea of, although mostly we wouldn't care about the death of a fly, Tennyson Turner asks us to create empathy for a living creature. So that is a layered critical analysis because I'm aware of generally how would we respond to the death of a fly. And specifically, how do we respond in this poem? Why is that different? How is it different? So it's not just this is what the fly is doing in the poem, but I've got a deeper awareness of the audience and our response to the topic and how that would be different from if we just saw a dead fly, for example. I also have this statement. The thesis statement is the most important sentence in your essay. Make sure that you can do them well and you know what they are and you know how to do them. I'm not going to go too much into that right now, but it's essentially your argument for your essay. So my argument is that life and death is random and chaotic. It's very tragic when things die unexpectedly. And that creates something called a memento mori, which helps us to contemplate our own lives and our own legacy. And so we have this idea of tragedy, we have this idea of randomness and chaos, and we have this idea of reflecting on ourselves. You might notice that this is a summary of what I said here in the plan. It's very important that your thesis connects to your plan that way, but it doesn't just repeat exactly what your plan says. It's important to kind of try and create your own way of expressing it in a sentence. That just takes practice. You have to just do it over and over until you feel confident boiling 3 points down into one sentence. And over time, that, for me now, that's a very straightforward thing to do, but it was probably the thing that I spent most of my time working on when I was trying to fix essays. Yeah, so here's a slight error. The fly's death is deeply tragic. Doesn't really matter too much if you're rushing and you've got timing issues. If you miss out a word or you accidentally spell one thing wrong, it's not a problem. If you do it consistently, it becomes a problem. So in this case, it's not too bad. So my point here is that it's tragic, sudden, unexpected. And then I analyse the opening. Opening is a structural technique. I analyse the tragic tone, which is a sort of overall feeling in the poem, and allusion as well, a good linguistic technique. Then I go to grammar, dynamic verb. I zoom in on a word, so I've got crush thee here between these pages, pent turns into just crushed and what the effect of crushed is. I also talk about repetition and the title, which is form and language together. And then what that implies, the fact that it's cruel. The fly had no hope of escaping its fate. Fate is also a concept that relates back to the idea of tragedy. So I'm showing that I know what tragic means, not just as a sad word, but as a genre of poetry or a genre of literature, of what the kind of rules and conventions are of that genre. Then we have direct address. We have a pronoun. So we've got some more grammatical techniques going on here. Pathos, which is pity. Another tragic term. So we've got fate and pathos. And personification. And amplification of the tragic nature of the death. So you can see this is absolutely packed full of techniques, but I'm not feature spotting. I'm not saying, here is a metaphor, and here is a simile, and here is alliteration. I'm using the techniques to expand and reinforce my argument that this is tragic, and I keep going back to the idea of it being tragic by using things like fate or pathos to explain that I'm really aware of what tragedy is. They also try and sort of bring it back around at the end. The death is accidental to the beginning, completely unexpected, but I'm not just repeating that. So if you want a high grade, you have to kind of repeat your concepts without your language. So the death is entirely accidental, is completely unexpected. They mean the same thing, but I've said it in a different way. So yeah, hopefully that makes sense to you and you can kind of see how you would put an intro together, also how you would put a paragraph together. I'm just going to whiz through the next ones so that it doesn't end up being a super long lesson, because sometimes people moan about how I waffle, and I do really waffle sometimes, so I'm trying to not waffle but give you very relevant information. So yeah, how do I not waffle? Sonnet form is a really good thing to pick up on. The form of the poem, I would suggest always do that in your essay. And here I start using a little bit of context. You don't need to use context, but in this case I felt like it worked well because I was talking about, the fact that it's a sonnet and what Victorian readers expect of a sonnet versus what they get here. So I did add a little bit of context in there, and that is a totally fine thing to do if it's supporting your argument. Don't just throw it in there randomly because you won't pick up any marks. And then I say that he turns his sonnet into an elegy. So I'm contrasting two forms here, the form of a sonnet with the form of an elegy, because he's honouring the death of the fly. This is just an English spelling, so it's not actually bad. And we've got some quotes, using what we call embedded quotes. So instead of slowing down and giving the quote and then analysing it, I'm just sort of putting the quotes in as I'm analysing so that everything's kind of compressed and sped up. So embedded quotes is always a good thing to do. And Yeah, and we have more kind of analysis of the form and the ideas of like religion, religious imagery, it should be there. Yeah, and I'm connecting the fact that he uses religious imagery to the fact that the poet was a vicar in a church, so that's really useful. I know some other things about him, like he was Alfred Lord Tennyson's older brother. That's not useful here, so I'm not going to say that. So I'm being very selective and what they call judicious about my information. And then, yeah, I have my slight twist paragraph at the end, which creates a critical argument. So this one is a sort of more structurally focused. It's about the volta and the turning point of the poem where it shifts away from the fly's death and more to us and our own mortality. It uses the form of memento mori, and it continues from the previous paragraph talking about elegy, but with more of a purpose. Like, it's less just about being sad about the fly and more about our own lives and the fragility of our existence and the legacy we leave behind and that kind of thing. So yeah, a few more structural techniques like caesura or shifting away. I think I do use volta at some point here. I vaguely remember writing volta, juxtaposition. I'm not deliberately doing language, then form, then structure in separate paragraphs. I'm mixing all of my techniques together. So there's a language technique here, metaphor, another one, symbolism. It's good to mix them up. But yeah, in my mind, I'm like, okay, I've done a really detailed form analysis. Probably I should do a detailed structure analysis. So that's what ends up happening here. And again, the ending of the paragraph reflects back on the beginning so that it feels complete, doesn't feel like I was just rushing. The conclusion is not so important. Just summarize your main strongest points again there. Make sure that, your argument that you established in the intro is reinforced. You're not going to pick up too many marks for it. If you miss it, it's not good. So do put at least a sentence for your conclusion. But yeah, don't worry too much. If you're really trying to get a high grade on essays, focus on writing your intro, your thesis, and your paragraphs well, and the conclusion will just sort of follow naturally. So yeah, I kind of rushed through that, which is nice. Hopefully it wasn't too long for you, and yeah, hopefully you found that useful and helpful, gave you some ideas on how to analyse poetry at a really detailed high level, how to use context without just throwing it in there. Like I said before, you don't have to use context for the Cambridge exams if you don't want to as well, so don't worry if you decided not to use context for this essay, because that's totally fine. So yeah, thank you very much for listening, and subscribe if you like these videos, and also have a look at our courses on scribbly.com if you want super detailed example essays and lots of practice questions and lots of notes on all the poems and that kind of thing. And yeah, we have like full courses on each module for Cambridge iGCSE on there. So yeah, hopefully that's useful for you if you feel like you need that level of support. So thank you very much for listening, and see you guys soon.